There he is.
Yay, Michael. I'm great. How are you?
Very well. It's nice to be here. I've been watching for about the last hour. It's very exciting.
Oh, you're so sweet. How did I do on recapping the story?
You got it close.
Can you fix the errors? Where was I wrong on errors?
Yeah, I went to Georgetown University and I was studying at the School of Foreign Service, which is it's not finance, but it's international relations. And I had always been interested in advertising my whole life. And in the middle of college, it's like you got to get a little bit of real world work experience. And I thought, well, it would be great to go work at an ad agency. And in terms of mentors, a friend of my father's was one of the executives at Saatchi & Saatchi, and I did the internship program there. And he put me with a really, really creative division of the company called Cliff Freeman and Partners. And these were the guys who years before, this was in the mid-'90s, but in the late '80s they had done Where's the Beef for Burger King, and they were doing all the Staples ads, and I don't know if you guys remember, but the cluster cereal with the squirrels and pizza for Little Caesars. And so they were really, really fun, creative shop to work for. And it was through working for them that I got introduced to the world of production. And I thought, wow, this is a real job. People do this for a living, which hadn't really occurred to me. And that's how I got introduced to the film industry and worked for several years as a production assistant, and then, like you said, I went to grad school in Los Angeles for film, and then it was after that I was directing commercials and realized that I really wanted to do movies, and discovered the Grey Garden story and started pursuing that full time, and that's when I moved up to San Francisco for the summer to do the research for because we found the friends in Mill Valley who you mentioned, who were the relatives of the Little and Big Edie. And I was up there doing, like you said, odd jobs. I painted somebody's, actually another student from Georgetown's house. I was gardening for another, I don't know anything about gardening, but they needed all these weeds pulled out, so I did that. And that's when you and I had lunch.
I remember that. I think you had a couple scratches on your arm from pulling things out. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not very talented in that area, so I hurt myself.
But you know what I love is there's a couple of times in your story where you've said you took an internship or you did the odd jobs, that you let your ego go. Yep. And you just focused on what you needed to do to move forward. The other thing that I think is amazing is that the Grey Gardens project, wasn't it a number of years that you worked on it?
From, you and I, the summer that you're talking about is summer of 2003, and I had seen the documentary and began working on the project February of 2003. It was 6 years from discovering the story to the premiere.
And a lot of people probably would have given up. 6 years. What made you keep going?
Well, I'm not sure this is the best advice, but I'll share it anyway. My father said, you've really got to have a plan B. And I looked at him and I said, I can't, because what I'm trying to do is so hard that if I have a plan B, I'll go to it. So, I mean, and I'll modify that by saying, because you said a minute ago about checking your ego. After the summer when you and I sat down and I was doing all that research up there, and the reason I was doing it up there was that these were private papers that belonged to the family, and they couldn't, send them down to me or risk having them be damaged. So I was up there and would go to their home and read them and take notes and whatnot. But after I came back from that and I had all the research not done but piled, and I had to start writing the script for the movie, I needed a job, and working freelance in the production arena, which is what I had been doing. You're constantly looking for a job. I mean, a job can be a day, it can be a week, it can be a month, but you're always looking for another job. And I was spending way too much time trying to find my next short-term gig, and it was taking away my time to write, frankly. And so I got a temp job initially, working for an entertainment attorney, and then that ended up becoming a full-time job. But having, left film school and having already directed commercials, that was a big, I don't want to say it was a step down, because it was a step to the, a lateral step so that I could, or not even lateral, it was a necessary step for me to do what my bigger goal was. But in terms of ego, I was answering his phone, and his clients were other directors who I had worked with, and it was hard. It was hard initially, but because I had a bigger goal in mind, it was something that I not allowed myself to do, but I encouraged myself to do because it took care of, the practical needs that I had, like money.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And you know what, it's very honest. You're talking about that. And I'm imagining that some of those relationships and the phone calls, while you were on the phone there and working as a temp probably served you later on in the bigger picture too. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was, it was like 2003 to, I don't know what it was, 2006. And one of the other attorneys who was at that same firm, I just passed him 2 days ago in the elevator, and he looked and he smiled at me and he said, "Congratulations, congratulations." And it's been years, but he still remembers that, that's what I was doing to make, my dreams and my goals happen.
Great. One thing I remember about when I interviewed you for the book, you talked about, so you got the rights to the story, and a lot of that was really showing the family that you cared and that you had integrity and that you were going to portray the story in a positive way. But I was also really interested, I remember you talking about your meeting with Jessica Lange and that you were very prepared and that you came in with this beautiful book that kind of showed your treatment. And I think you said afterwards that she called somebody on the project and said, he's a real director, he knows what he's doing. And so what I want to talk to you about is how you got the meeting, why was preparation important, and how you ended up networking with people like Jessica Lange and Drew Barrymore.
Well, I will. I'll back up like a second from that because the story starts just slightly earlier in terms of the idea of preparation. What's that Chinese saying that luck is preparation and opportunity or something like that? Intersecting. And I obviously skipping like 2-3 years forward from when I started doing the research. I had now had this script. It was 2005. I was just finishing it, or I was just finished with it. And out of coincidence, there was a documentary that was at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York that was a short documentary, and it was essentially about the fanaticism surrounding Grey Gardens, like the strong fan base. And there was an article or a headline in the New York Post that said that Renee Zellweger was dying to play Edith Bouvier-Beale. And Renee Zellweger was, top of the A-list at that point in her career. And my producer called up her agent and said, "I have that script." And he said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Look at, page 6 in the Post." And he called her back and said, "Send me that script." And that script then got into her agency, which is CAA, which is a very, very well-respected agency. And Jessica Lange's agent, actually the same agent represented Jessica Lange and Drew Barrymore at the time, and he circulated it. And out of coincidence, he had been sitting down with Jessica earlier in the spring, and he said, "What kind of projects do you want to do? What should I be looking out for?" And she said, "Well, I don't know anything about it, but there's this really fascinating documentary called Grey Gardens." So she independently brought it up to him. He heard that the script was into the agency that Renee Zellweger was looking at it. He sent it to her. I got a call. She was one of 2 people who was on my list for the role. He called up and said, "Would you meet with her?" I said, "Would I meet with her? Of course. I mean, I'd die to meet with her." So all of these different things intersected and kind of conspired to make the inevitable happen. And when I sat down with her, I had a very comprehensive, what we call like a lookbook of visuals, of photographs that told the story and gave an indication of how I visually saw it being executed, and that impressed her.
So it was a lot of preparation and a little bit of serendipity, it sounds like.
Yeah, but I think those pieces, those kinds of serendipity actually come all. I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person, but there's that story about someone being told, that Jesus or that the Lord is going to come visit them, and they open the door and there's, somebody there, and they close the door, and then it happens 3 times, and then later on he says, "Why didn't you come visit?" He says, "I came 3 times, but you didn't see me." And I think that that's what happens with these kinds of opportunities. I think they actually are constantly coming up, but we have to be prepared for them, or we don't notice that they're there.
Right. So it's really, the preparation. Another statement, though, that you said when I interviewed you that I loved, you said that, at least in Hollywood, that agents don't go where it's cold and make it hot. They go where it's warm and they make it bigger, and that you need to make your own heat. So you were, in essence, preparing yourself, getting your skills. You went back to school. You were doing the jobs that you needed to do and starting to create your own heat. So Grey Gardens gets made. It goes on. It wins an Emmy, right?
Emmy and a Golden Globe.
And a Golden Globe. Amazing for your first long feature. What happens next? It becomes a calling card?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of your work speaks to, what you want to do next and what you're capable of doing. Hollywood has a bit of a bad habit of wanting to pigeonhole you and do what you've done before. So somebody offered me another project that was actually a very interesting story, but out of coincidence, she ends up kind of old, living alone, and having a lot of cats. And I thought, well, I think I've already done that story. So it was a matter of finding, just finding a story that speaks to you. And at that point, I had put so much effort into Grey Gardens that it wasn't like I had 5 or 6 things lined up, other things lined up, because that was, I got a lot of meetings off of the script, and then once the movie went into production, they wanted to sort of wait to see how the movie turned out and whatnot. And then when it did, then a lot of opportunities. Every time something happens, like a piece of your work comes out, it other opportunities, it opens the floodgates for new possibilities, and that's what happened with The Vow.
And so tell me, how did you end up getting the Vow project? How did you get recommended for that?
My manager sent me a script for what I guess is sort of a romantic comedy, and it was an adaptation of a book, and I read it, and it wasn't really my sensibility, so I passed on it, and it was being done by a company. Now it's the company called MGM, but at the time they were called Spyglass. My manager said, well, she wants to meet with you anyway, so you should just sit down as a general. So I sat down with this woman who's an executive at the company, and we got on famously. She's now become a very, very close friend of mine. And she said, so I heard, we had discussed other projects and things they had in development and things that I liked and things that I wanted to do. And then she said, I hear you passed on our project, what were your notes? And I said, well, here they are. And she said, well, those are really smart notes. And I said, thanks. And she said, well, we have another project that maybe you'd be interested in. And she pitched me The Vow. And at that point, the script wasn't ready to be released because they were still working on it. And I said, that really does interest me. So please send it when it's ready. And about a month later, she got in contact. So I think that what that story is about is not saying no, saying,
explore.
Being upfront that what I was being asked to come in for wasn't interesting, but being open to the opportunity of coming in anyway, and it worked out well for both of us.
Obviously you've had great success now in Hollywood, but are there ever times when you are intimidated by, the people that you're meeting with or the networks, and how do you get over, any fear? Do you have any fear about these meetings? If I was meeting Drew Barrymore, I'd be a little overwhelmed.
Well, there's a project, a biopic that I want to do about a fashion designer, and someone said that I need to meet with Anna Wintour, and I was in New York at the time, and I said, I'm not ready to meet with Anna Wintour. I don't know what to wear.
Black. You wear black, right?
I know. I haven't set that meeting yet. People are looking to hire you. They want, they want to hire you, but they want to hire they're looking. I'll not make it general. Let's say about me. They're looking to me for answers. They're looking for a director with a point of view. They're looking for someone to shepherd a project and to lead it and to have a clear take on the material. You're not going. This applies to auditions too. A lot of times actors think like, well, what do I do to please the director? You can't possibly know what I want. And I don't always know exactly what I want. I know it when I see it. And so you have to do your best. You have to do your interpretation and have to do your take, because especially when you're auditioning someone, sometimes you get the same take 9 times, the same version 9 times from 9 different people. And then all of a sudden somebody does it different, and that feels unique and that feels fresh, and that's what you want. So there's not a right answer for those actors who are auditioning for a director, and it's the same thing for the director who's meeting with the studio or with the producers. It's the coherence of the vision and the passion for it that they're looking for. So it's not intimidating to me, because I'm not trying to second guess what they want. I'm just trying to present my vision and my point of view.
So you're being authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I want to just ask if there are any questions. We've got people around the globe who watch this show, and a lot of them are photographers and filmmakers. So Russ and Chris, do we have any questions for Michael from around the globe?
Absolutely, Michael. This is Russ. I'm one of the hosts here. Great to have you, by the way. Thank you. We have a question from Purple J who says, do you strategically create the chance to network and make connections, or do you find yourself in them more organically and take advantage when they appear? Or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think the answer is a little bit of both. I mean, because it's it's like Washington is with politics, Los Angeles, is to this industry, and so as I suppose San Francisco is to the kind of the tech world. So going out for drinks or going to a restaurant or going to an event, you're not going to not bump into somebody who's related to the business. I don't really find myself like angling. Like, for instance, I was at recently Sacha Baron Cohen stepped off of a project that was a biopic about Freddie Mercury from Queen. And there was another director on it anyway, but that hadn't been announced as of the Oscars. And I was at an event for Les Miserables. It was like a party, basically. And he was there, and I was kind of a little bit angling a little left, angling a little right to see if it would kind of organically come up. But I wasn't going to bum rush him. I mean, it's not like network come hell or high water, because if you come off aggressive or you approach somebody sort of in the wrong context, it doesn't really get you anywhere. So if it had come up very organically, I would have said, hey, I know you don't have a director yet on that project. I'd really love to sit down with you. And then I would have moved on from the conversation. I would have put the idea in his head, let him kind of know who I am and how, in terms of how to get to me, like which agency I'm with or which project I did so that you can look me up, someone can look me up. But I wouldn't have bent his ear, I wouldn't have, bent his ear about it at the party. It's not the right context for it. But it didn't work out organically to bring that up. And so I let it pass. So that would be an example of where I was maybe trying, but I don't do that on a regular basis. I let things kind of happen as organically as possible, because then it feels, I think when people feel that there's a strong, especially in Hollywood, if there's like a strong agenda happening, you kind of feel played. Yeah. And it doesn't feel, well, like I said, it doesn't feel organic, and then I think people get defensive.
Right. There's one other lesson that I just want to bring up that when I interviewed you that came out like loud and clear, and it's back to Grey Gardens. You had spent a lot of energy on the script, and HBO decided to pick up the project, and as I recall, they said to you that they wanted another writer to take a pass at it, and I think your quote back to me, you had talked to your agent, and the advice was, do you want 100%, you were a little upset at first, do you want 100% of something that never gets made or 50% of something that does? Can you tell me about that, learning about the power of collaboration and what you could learn from it?
Yeah, and it's actually, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I forget exactly, in the last hour you were talking about something, and it sparked that same, it was about the idea of paying it forward and giving, I'm not maybe using the right vocabulary, but the idea of giving things away, giving things away for free type of a thing, in terms of your time and your advice and your connections, and not hoarding that. What comes out of that, and then I'll go kind of double back to your question, is that you come off to other people as a team player and a collaborator. And if you come off as being self-serving and hoarding and that kind of thing, I think subconsciously people don't want to engage with you. But if they see you as somebody who's willing to set up a contact and not expect 10% of the earnings in return, that you're a team player, and then they're open to bringing you in on something. They'll think of you and say, we should bring in Porter because she'd be really good for this. But what they're subconsciously saying is that she's a team player. And in terms of the specific example, I mean, it was just I was new, obviously, to the system. Hollywood always has tons of writers on it. Different writers have different skills. I think what I learned from that, what happened is that we basically had a very we had a project that was too expensive. The script I had written was just not going to fit into the budget. And we needed to go into a different direction. And frankly, I was really close to the material, and it was hard for me to sort of do mental acrobatics and just reimagine the project as drastically as it needed to be reimagined. It was a 40-year linear piece. It just went from the 1930s straight through the 1970s. And what we later did was end up cross-cutting it with between the past and the present being the 1970s and the past being the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s. And that just allowed us to jump time and then therefore cut whole chunks out of the script. And initially it was difficult because I had obviously ownership of the idea and whatnot. But working with this other writer, Patricia, she really opened my eyes to what didn't need to be in the script to still tell the same story. It was just as effective, and you didn't lose anything by losing things, by losing different parts of the what I had originally written. The core of it was still there, and that was really valuable.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you have a lot going on. Are you working on a project right now?
Yeah, directors always have to have like several irons in the fire. So
anything you can share with us?
Yeah, recently we just announced a project called Dare Me. It's a book written by a woman named Megan Abbott, and it's the New York Times described the book as Heathers meets Fight Club.
My gosh.
It's about a high school cheerleading squad whose lives are turned upside down by a coach, and it's a thriller. It's kind of the other comparison is Mean Girls meets To Die For. It's kind of dark, but it's got this sort of Mean Girl kind of dialogue world setting. But it's very well written, and Megan Abbott has done the adaptation, and it's a project that Fox 2000 is producing. So we're excited to do that hopefully this fall.
Well, congratulations. You obviously will not get typecast because you're doing such a variety of types of work. So yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being in the book and for sharing your wisdom with the class and the online viewers. It's great to see you again, and hope to see you in person someday soon.
Soon. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Wow, that's fascinating, right? 6 years that he worked on that. So again, not that you have to work 6 years on getting your business going, but it's just an important reminder that so much of kind of creativity and putting things together is really about being focused and being passionate. The other thing that I do talk a lot about in the book is that when you're creating things, whether it's photography or ideas or helping somebody bring their GMAT business to life and their ideas, that those are the things that you're connecting on. So there's what's between the relationship that's really important, and that it can become a calling card for the future. So we are going to talk a little bit about 3 degrees of separation. We've talked about this briefly. It's all about technology, but I want to talk about why networking is so much more important than it was in the past. We did talk about how our networks are getting bigger, but the phrase 3 degrees or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, have you guys played that game? It's now down to 4 degrees because of technology. And if you have things in common, it's 3 degrees or 2 degrees. And so, all of the filmmakers and the people that we talk to, they probably are much closer together because of all the things that they have in their lives.